Hello and welcome to week 7 of season 3 for the Virtual Racing School video tutorial series. This week in the iRacing Blancpain GT3 series we are at the legendary Spa-Francorchamps, an incredible circuit full of history and known for its challenging high speed corners. Probably my favourite circuit actually on all of iRacing. In its current form it remains one of the most challenging circuits in the world for both car and driver, but is also one of the most exhilarating, with the roller coaster that is Eau Rouge probably being the best thrill found anywhere on any track. I'm returning to the Audi R8 for this week's tutorial, a car that needs to be driven on a knife edge but has beautiful balance around here. Spa is also known for its endurance events, given its considerable length, and with the real world 24 hours taking place this weekend and the iRacing event the following weekend, we are sure to see some seriously impressive lap times over the coming days and weeks. So, as usual, I've driven a lap for this tutorial on qualifying fuel in default weather, which isn't perfect, but with it being a long lap it takes a lot of dedication to hook up a decent time and get all those sectors nicely hooked up. So to get us started, I'll play through the lap once first without commentating, before then doing some analysis. Okay, so we're going to go back to the just before the start-finish line, exiting the bus stop chicane to start our lap. Obviously you want a really good exit out of the bus stop, so you get a nice amount of top speed across the line here. It's the first line where the lap starts. Now you're obviously thinking about your braking zone into La Source. I believe it's about 100 meters, but the track kind of rises. There's a bit of a dip and then it rises, and that's pretty much where I brake. But it is about 100 meters. We just have a look at that quickly. So we got a 100-meter marker over there, so it's a bit far away, but it's in the peripheral. So hard braking zone, obviously. maintaining that brake pressure for a long time, gradually coming down the gears, being patient, waiting for the car to slow down enough, and then turning in. And turning in whilst maintaining some brake pressure, because typically you get quite a lot of understeer trying to hit the apex here. And it's really important to not run yourself too wide in La Source. You want to get up as close to this wall as much as possible, and then kind of pick up the throttle just as you go, just past it there. So I was actually a tiny little bit wide than I would have liked on this particular lap, but then picking up the throttle nicely, opening the steering up full power as early as you can, waiting for the car to settle first, and then as early as you can, and then opening the steering up as you do so, and then allow the car to run over this exit curb, but not onto that AstroTurf or grasscrete, because it's a little bit slippery. So then as you come down towards Eau Rouge, you keep your car nice and close up to this wall on the right here, all the way down towards the bottom, and then as you aim for the first apex, you want to take a lot of this curb, pretty much as you can afford to, before getting a 1x. Now most of the 1x's occur right up here where the curb ends, so as long as you turn in nice and early, then you won't end up coming in from too far over to the right and hitting that 1x. So I've done that quite nicely. Let's just play it through there. So yeah, a decent amount of the car is over that curb, and then this is obviously flat out, and then just as you start to turn right, you come off the throttle. It's a full lift, and there was a tiny little bit of brakes as well there. Not everyone is going to brake, obviously. I prefer to do it, just makes me a little bit more comfortable in knowing that I'm going to hit this next apex up the hill. Obviously it's very important to hit this your turn-in point, because if you run too wide here, you're going to be in all sorts of trouble over the top, and at the very least you're going to have to lift out of it massively to make it round, and you're going to lose loads and loads of speed up through the Kemmel Straight. So still not quite back on full throttle yet. Now we're at full throttle, and just being nice and gentle with the steering now as we crest over the curb. Just a slight gentle, very gentle slight flick to the left, to bring us over this curb as it comes into sight. If you use too much of this curb, obviously you're going to get a 1x and then potentially even a cutting penalty. So this is about right. So we'll just show you what that looks like. So the whole car is over the curb, and you can get away with that, and then keeping the car over, steering left ever so slightly just to keep it from drifting too far right as you enter the Kemmel Straight there. So plenty of commitment there. You need lots of commitment, because you want as much straight line speed as you can down the Kemmel Straight. Now braking into Lecumbe, pretty much braking at the 100-meter board again, but I actually spot this curb on the left and I brake just before the curb. So there we go, hard on the brakes just before the curb, and notice I'm allowing the car to, this is my personal preference, allowing my car to sit on this curb with the left wheels in the braking zone, because it gives me a nice wide entry into the first corner. So still hard on the brakes. Now we're bleeding off as we turn in. Trail braking. Now I did actually want to take a bit more curb on the right here than I actually ended up doing. So if I just show you that, I did obviously get my inside wheels over there, but you can afford to get up on this grasscrete, concrete thing, whatever it is, and it will kind of just pull you around a bit nicely, and then kind of you aim to do the same thing, so you've had a full lift in between before getting back on the power again, and then just kind of bringing the car over as tight as you can to keep it as wide as possible into the final corner of this sequence, and using lots of curb this time. Let me show you that. Well, slightly more actually. Again, probably could have used a tiny bit more, but you got to be a bit more careful with this one. In reality, you can afford to take more curb on the previous corner. This one you've got to be a little bit more careful because of this bump right there. So just as you exit, you've got to be cautious. So notice that I'm not being aggressive with the throttle over there, because I want to bring the car back over to the left. Do I actually reach full throttle? Yeah, very briefly. Just a slight, a very brief moment there onto full throttle, and before lifting off fully again. And now I really like the way the car feels through this section. Often as you get onto the power through here, you want to kind of open the steering and let the rear tyres do just as much work as the front tyres. So you end up having a really nice balance. Notice how I'm kind of playing with the wheel just to keep the car nice and open for the exit, and also anticipating sometimes you get oversteer as you get hard on the power. Now you've got to be careful here as you go onto this curb on the exit, again because of incidents. The circuit's notorious for this in iRacing. There's many curbs which can catch you out and get you unwanted incident points, but so where this curb ends, you have to be back with half car's width onto the right, onto the circuit again. So that's quite nice. So up into fifth very briefly. You don't have to go up into fifth. You can hold it on the limiter in fourth. It doesn't matter too much. I'm just used to going up into fifth now. So again, using the curb on the left to spot your braking zone into I've forgotten the name of this corner, sorry. And then just kind of turning in nice and early as you start braking. So you're as you approach it from the leftmost part of the circuit, braking at the curb, but it's a downhill braking zone, so your brake pressure isn't too much. But notice how I'm immediately aiming for the apex. So you want quite an early initial apex. I've actually missed it ever so slightly there, so I should be a little bit tighter at this point. And then what you want to do is maintain that trail braking throughout and allow the car to run out wide just a tiny bit before keeping the steering nice and tight to apex again on the exit. Now you want to leave it in second gear as well, because you'll get better acceleration out of the corner. And so yeah, trying to keep it nice and tight on the exit. Full power just before you are up into third. Bring it over to the right, but try and avoid using too much of this curb on the right into turn 11, the corner without a name. And you've got to be so tricky as you turn into this one, because as you come off the curb, the car gets unsettled. There's also a bit of a bump there as well. Just have a look at that. It's a little bit of a bump here. And what I find myself doing into this corner, and also Puon later on, is just breathing on the throttle just after I've turned in. And what that does is reduces the entry oversteer slightly. So I'm on the brakes, I'm turning in and just breathing on the throttle just to keep the front end from biting in too hard, because it's so easy for the car to bite in really nastily and you get massive oversteer through here. So that was quite nice. As you clip the curb on the inside, you want to be off the pedals and then immediately back on the power, opening the steering hard on the power, and again being conscious of track limits as you exit. So that's about right. You can't afford to go more than half a car's width over the extent of this red and white curbing. So that was quite nice, keeping the car nice and straight as you keep it over to the right, down towards Pluon. Now, I brake about halfway along this curb on the right, keeping it on the curb actually. Now, reasonably hard braking zone, but very, very brief. And then you want to just kind of aim for a well-timed apex. So again, it's a 2 apex corner, but much faster. Probably quite a terrifying corner in real life because you're approaching it at such speed and it's downhill and it's a super fast corner. So we see people having big accidents when they get this one wrong. So again, you see that as I'm coming off the brakes, as I'm turning in, just breathing on the throttle just to push it out wide so that I hook up with this apex nicely. And then we're kind of waiting patiently, a little bit of coasting there, waiting for the perfect time to get back on the power. And it's quite a committed return to power. So that was like 80-90% and then full power. And then what you want to do is time that so that you can keep that throttle flat all the way through the exit, and the car will want to push wide, so it's important that you do hook up back to this second apex so that you don't run out of track on the exit. You can afford to go up over this curve just a little bit more, but obviously you want to keep it as tight as you can. Now, I was a little bit too cautious into the S's. Now, you probably want to brake just a tiny bit later than I have done. So just before the sign here, gantry I think it is. So yeah, braking quite hard again, but then bringing it back down to trail braking as I bleed off, as I turn in. So the braking phase is kind of over now. I'm turning in, but I'm trail braking, just breathing on the throttle again. I do that quite a lot. But especially here because I broke a little bit too early, so I've overslowed the car slightly. So I just want to bring it back up to the speed where I want it to be, and then you want to keep it nice and tight. A little short spurt of throttle in between the two corners, and then again being patient, bringing it over to the left, and feeding the power in nicely for the exit. Now, this curb here is quite nasty because you're quite traction limited when you go over it, especially if you get onto this green stuff, and then you'll get an incident again. So just be aware of that. Bring it back over to the left again into Stavolo, braking again just before the curb on the left, aiming for a nice early apex on the right. Not sure if that is an early apex actually, it's pretty standard. But then allowing the car to open up and go up onto this curb here. Now, I've pretty much maximised the use of this curb almost entirely, so any more and again you'll get an incident point. So into the final part, exiting Stavolo. Not sure what this one's called, unfortunately. I was a little bit too late to turn in, so let's just have a look at that. Breathing out of the throttle to get the car turned in, trying to commit to full throttle but having to bleed out again. So you just see that, so trying to get to full power but a little bit too early, because the line that I'm on is a little bit too wide, a little bit too late to turn in, so not quite able to commit to full throttle and having to take that slight lift. So full, then a lift, and then back to full again. And notice how I am extremely wide on the exit. This is extremely close to being an incident. And I also pick up a little bit of oversteer right there, just on the exit. So that was just about got away with it. And also I actually had quite a nice exit. So again, just about got away with it, and I had a nice amount of speed in towards Blancpain. So you want to be keeping the steering to a minimum as you approach Blancpain, keeping the car over to the left and then letting it run over to the right, and just kind of timing your turn in into Voltramon as best as you can. Notice how I had a few stabs at getting to full throttle there, and I also breathe on the brake ever so slightly, just for a confidence measure really, just to make sure, like in Eau Rouge, that I'm getting the car in and turned enough. So just kind of playing with the throttle just to try and not get on the power too early, because if you do get on the power too early, you'll run out of track on the exit here and get another incident. So you've got to be aware of that. And then allowing the car to travel over in a straight line over to the left. Now, depending on obviously what the time of day and the weather conditions are like, these shadows are what I pretty much use as my braking zone. So you've got these taller, you've got a slight gap in the trees, and then you've got some taller trees before they end, and I pretty much brake just before that gap, basically. So we can see that, but there's other patches on the circuit. So in terms of braking markers, there's not really anything helpful here. So you pretty much just have to spot your references on the actual track itself. So obviously it is a very important braking zone. You're braking from very, very high speed, keeping the car in a nice straight line for a long time, bringing the speed right down into second gear. Only now am I starting to turn in, am I bleeding off the brakes. Quite late in the braking zone, obviously. Now I was, again, a little bit too cautious approaching the bus stop, a little bit too early on the brakes this time. So I had to come off the brakes a little bit more than normal. So normally at this point you'd be harder on the brakes because you'd be carrying a bit more speed due to having broke a bit later. So I've just kind of compensated, come off the brake pedal a little bit early. Now you want to aim for a really nice tight apex over both these curbs. You want to straight line this chicane as much as possible, carry as much speed through here as possible. And to do so you want to be trail braking as you turn in as well. So trail braking, getting the car over to the right as much as possible before then turning hard left. The car is still very, very slow at this point for me, which is what you want, so that you can get the car turned in for the all-important exit. So let's just have a look at that, right up as close as you can get to the higher part of the curb, the red part of the curb. So I was a little bit wide there again as well. As a result, a little bit slow out, and then just kind of being patient as you progressively bring in the power, so as to avoid using too much traction control and fighting with the car and the tyres too much on the exit, and then just keeping the car in a straight line as you cross over the line for your lap. So that was a 2 minutes 18.854. As ever, I'm using the same setup as uploaded to virtualracingschool.com, where you should register if you haven't already done so, as you can find other full data packs in other cars at various circuits with replays, setups and telemetry provided by Coanda SimSport drivers. Okay, so good luck this weekend, and this week and next week in the 24 hours for those who are racing, and thanks for watching.